Welcome to Conversations with Cox and Kielseth, and to be more specific, that is filmmaker Alex Cox and myself, film curator Pablo Kielseth. Alex will join us by phone from his home in Oregon, while I sneak away from my office to call him from one of the projection booths used by the International Film Series, which has been screening foreign and independent movies at CU Boulder since 1941. We will keep our chats to about 20 minutes as we discuss whatever movie-related topics grab our fancy. Thanks for joining us.
Snow-covered winter's day.
Alejandro,
how are you today?
I'm okay. How about you, sir?
I'm very well, thank you.
Excellent. Oh, I just very quickly just want to, as I got a beer in hand.
What kind of beer?
It's a oatmeal stout from Fremont.
Ah.
How about yourself?
I'm having a B100 from the Farmhouse Brewery in Yarhouse, Oregon.
Nice.
Yeah.
Well, I'm raising my glass to two directors that just have passed away. I just read their obituaries recently. There was Richard Donnan died at 91.
Oh, wow.
And of course, people will know him for The Omen, Lethal Weapon, Superman, and quite a few others. But you know what I did not know about him was that he took his stage name from the infamous Donner Pass massacre. And in the obituary, it says that that event happened to be observing its centennial at the time. And the Donner Pass massacre, I think was like 1947 or something. So he must have been, 17 when he took the stage name.
No, it was wasn't it the 19th century, the Donner Pass massacre? It was something like when they were going out to when they were all going out to California, and isn't that when they became cannibals?
The Donner Pass thing was they were talking about the centennial.
Oh, the centennial of it. I see. Yes.
Yeah. But anyway, and then the other person, director who just passed away was Robert Downey Sr. He died at 85.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, I talked to Rudy Wurlitzer, and he told me that. Yeah, they were great pals. Yeah, what a shame.
Yeah, and father not only to Robert Downey Jr., but also the director of counterculture indie films like Putney Swope, Greaser's Palace. And I have a funny sort of story because when I used to work at Stars Encore in the acquisitions department in the mid '90s, I would read scripts to consider for production. And one of the scripts that I read was for Hugo Poole, which is that it was basically his work. He did end up releasing it later in 1997 with no help from Stars Encore, and it's a quirky kind of a comedy. Romantic comedy about a pool cleaner who falls in love with a man dying of Lou Gehrig's. But what I remember about reading it is I just remember thinking it was a very unusual and interesting script, unlike any of the other things that I was seeing fall across my lap, most of which was kind of direct to TV stuff. And I kind of knew I liked it because it differentiated itself from all the other stuff that I was used to reading. And I knew immediately that there was no way it was going to get past the brass at that point. But no, but what we're going to talk about today is the fact that I've twisted your arm a little bit. Sight and Sound, the international film magazine that has been coming out for a long time. And it's always been a great resource for picking movies to show as part of the International Film Series, great reviews and all that kind of stuff. The cover story was about the 100 Hidden Heroes of Cinema, celebrating the forgotten and overlooked people who have shaped film history. And I thought it would be kind of funny to just take a stab at a couple standout names. And if you don't mind, I'll start with Pablo Ferro, not just because he's, we share the same name, but Pablo Ferro actually is he's a title designer. He passed away 3 years ago. He did incredible work. His title designs will be known to anyone who has seen Doctor Strangelove or Clockwork Orange or Harold and Maude.
I don't think he designed the titles for Clockwork Orange. He did a 1 minute trailer for the film, I think. Did he design the titles as well?
Yeah. And well, because Niall Southern was a friend, of course, because we've got Niall out here and that, the Terry Southern connection. Mm-hmm. And it was through Niall Southern that we brought him out to the International Film Series. And, he was a very flamboyant and unforgettable character. He was always dressed up very nice with a suit, like a black suit, some distinct glasses. And he always had this red scarf wrapped around his neck. And we actually ended up showing what was basically the first film, his own little indie film that he shot. And his claim to fame, it was called The Inflatable Doll, and it only ever got passed around on the the really independent circuit. And its claim to fame was that it was the first short film that was shot digitally that was then transferred to 35 millimeter film. And it was a very quirky little short, but he was just he was a fascinating character. He definitely influenced a lot of movies, and he's the first person that popped out to me from the list of unsung heroes.
But it also called into question the idea that this is a list of forgotten and unsung heroes, because, as you say, Pablo Ferro is very well known.
Yeah,
and you'd brought him out to the IFS as a guest, So it is kind of. I do find. I mean, there's some names on the list, like Richard Silbert, one of the greatest American production designers of all time, is hardly an unheralded or forgotten individual. I mean, he designed Chinatown and Dick Tracy, So it's a kind of a. It's silly to come up with a list like this in a certain way, because these are people who are enormously well known.
No, that's a fair point. That might be a bit of a misnomer in terms of how they positioned it. But I do like the idea of, films are these collective ventures made possible by the work of, just hundreds of people. And
yes, and it's certainly true that it doesn't. I mean, what they do is they're making lists. They're trying to make lists that don't include actors, directors, or, for the most part, producers. And they're concentrating on other crew people, including a number of casting directors. A name that I found interesting, because I didn't actually know her name, although she was the costume designer for A Clockwork Orange, and Barry Lyndon, and Dick Tracy, Milena Canonero. And if you look at her credit list, it's incredibly long and very super respectable. And so that was good to see her on the list, because I actually didn't know her name.
Right. In a similar vein, I'll hopscotch over to number 48 on the list, Agnes Chranitsky. And she basically is she's the editor behind her husband, Bella Tarr. And I thought that was a good shout out, because I've seen several Bella Tarr films, but I have to admit that I hadn't necessarily thought about who was behind the editing. And
because they're such long takes that the initial thought is that the editing is done in a day, right? But in fact, it takes as long to edit a long take film as it does a regular one, because you still have to get it right.
Yeah, but no, it was interesting to read about how she would be, of course, she's Bella Tarr's wife, but how she'd be present on the set, and how, Bella Tarr has acknowledged how indispensable she was for her eye and feel, quote, for the rhythm and melancholic lament of these worlds, end quote. So anybody who's a fan of Satan Tango or Werkmeister Harmonies or The Turin Horse, Man from London, you should be thinking a little bit about Agnes Chranitsky. So yeah, no, that was I was glad to come across her name. Yeah.
Yeah. There's also, I mean, okay, there's names that are very famous. I mean, like Yakima Canutt, the famous stunt man who doubled John Wayne and did all the John Ford movies. But again, he's a famous guy, Yakima Canutt. If you're interested in John Ford movies, you know who that guy was. And Jack Foley, the inventor of Foley.
Sure.
Which is footsteps, where you just do the non-crucial sound effects like footsteps, doors opening, that kind of thing, was apparently invented in the US by Jack Foley, and so he gets a mention in the list. But you could also have mentioned a guy called Juan Gavira, because in Mexico, simultaneously to the American studios inventing Foley in Hollywood, the Mexican golden age of cinema invented Gavira, and the protagonist of Mexican Footsteps was Juan Gavira.
I did not know that.
And so when we worked in Mexico and did Footsteps, we did, es hora de la Gavira.
Perfect. Okay, you're probably going to laugh a little bit at the one that I selected next, number 57, Tom Luddy, who was a programmer at the Pacific Film Archive and curated a lot of films there, but then ended up producing a lot of independent movies for Zoetrope, as well as some for Paul Schrader, like Mishima. And then, of course, he was one of the founders of the Telluride Film Festival. And I picked him a little bit just because, first of all, I've always enjoyed I've been going to the Telluride Film Festival for 27 years. And Tom Luddy is always instantly recognizable. He's a very laid back dude. And I like the fact that he gets people together.
You're just mentioning people you know. You're just picking people you know.
Well, no, I mean, I don't know him personally, but the reason I picked him was because
you've been going to the Telluride Film Festival for 27 years. Of course, you know Tom Luddy. You do know him.
No, we've never exchanged words. I
really?
guarantee you. But so I picked him because he was a programmer and I'm a programmer. So I felt like that's right. There was that little bit of overlap, but also because I laughed at one. It was your wife, Todd, who said something along the lines of how she got inspired to be a producer when she saw Tom Luddy in action, because she saw that, you just make some phone calls, and she's like, I can do that. And then she, lo and behold, I should let her probably speak to that experience, but
she has other funny Tom Luddy stories and producer stories too. So yeah, you should, but I will let her tell them.
Sure. Did you have anyone else?
Terio Nogami, a woman called Terio Nogami. Again, she's very famous. If you know about Kurosawa, then this woman was like his right-hand person throughout, the best part of his career. And she's written a book called Waiting on the Weather, about working for Kurosawa and working for the Japanese film industry. Which is illustrated by hand. And one of the scenes she depicts is they're pulling an all-nighter on a Japanese studio film for Toho or Daiei or whatever in the 1950s. And the speed guy comes around. And there's a guy with like hypodermic syringes full of amphetamines. And, they just, over here, please. And the guy comes by and just gives you a shot of speed to keep you working through the night on whatever the movie is. And so it's a fascinating story of Japanese film culture, and not anything like you'd expect. So Terio Nogami, certainly, and she's the author of this book, Waiting on the Weather, which is really worth reading. The
next one that kind of caught my eye, and I have definitely never, ever met or talked to this guy, but it's just his job title alone is what's instantly grabbing, because not only was he a cinematographer, he was also an insect wrangler. And it turns out we're talking about Ken Middleham, who ended up doing work on the Oscar-winning documentary The Hellstrom Chronicle in 1971, as well as Saul Bass's Phase 4 from 1974.
Hellstrom Chronicles is directed by Waylon Green, who wrote
That's
The
correct.
Wild Bunch and Sorcerer.
Oh man, yeah. I mean, it's that's such an interesting overlap right there. And Ken Middleham also worked on a film that I've shown in my backyard on 16 millimeter that was just so much fun, and it's about the fire breathing cockroaches, and I'm talking about Bug from 1975, of course. I don't know how to say that director's name. Janot Swarks film Bug. Anyway,
I haven't seen it, but it sounds excellent.
he also did Damnation Alley in 1977. So,
okay,
yeah,
which is a post-apocalyptic thing about guys in great big trucks rampaging through the jackpot, right?
I've actually never seen Damnation Alley. I've seen Bug, but not Damnation Alley.
I think I saw it, and I didn't see Bug. We cover the waterfront. Hey, okay. Well, there's also on that list. I mean, shoot, Jack Pierce, who did the Frankenstein and Mummy and Bride of Frankenstein, and
yes,
all that horror makeup for those classic Universal horror films.
And that certainly goes to your point, because Jack Pierce is far from being a hidden hero.
That's the thing, because none of these people are mopes. I mean, they're very. I mean, Jack Pierce, Richard Silbert, Tom Luddy. Everybody knows who they are already.
Yeah.
Anybody who's a cineast knows who they are.
Sure.
So, whereas, and the same is true of Ms. Nogami. I want to see, where's Richard Beggs? Why isn't he up there? Or Hashimoto, who was the writer of Kurosawa, or Dan Wall, or Cecilia Montiel, a great production designer and student of Silbert, or most important of all, where is Obayashi, director of Mandom?
Well, we're going to have to, maybe they should be coming out with some more. This could be an ongoing theme, because you're right. It could run for decades, and you could always find some super interesting people and talented folks that deserve more credit. Did you buy? I'm going to mention one more, and then I'll skip to 100. But I did want to give a shout out to and again, I'm going to mangle the name here, but I'm talking about the Kieslowski's favorite composer, Zbigniew Preisner, and because I mean, not only did he do the music for the Decalogue and the Double Life of Veronique, but he also, of course, did the Three Colors. And I specifically, I remember I fell in love with his work on specifically White. Even though most people kind of prefer Red, I'm in the White fanboy category. But anyway, yeah, it's I just wanted to give him a shout. Did you have anyone else after that?
Who else did I write down on my list? Let me have a look. There's somebody that there's somebody I know on the list, a guy called Robert Gitt, who's a film restoration guy who was involved in restoring Night of the Hunter. Oh,
that's fantastic work.
Yeah, and The Red Shoes. And he's based at UCLA, I think, still. And when I was a work-study graduate student at UCLA in the 1970s, I worked for Bob Gitt, among others, like carrying cans of stuff in the film archives and rewinding things that had been projected, and so it is nice to see somebody who you know get on any kind of a list. You always go, oh yeah, I know that guy. I used to be his work study student.
Right.
Phil Solomon should be on that list, for God's sake.
Well, again, it should be an ongoing theme, but I'll jump over to what they did with the slot for the 100th slot, and in the very last paragraph, they sort of do a quick little run through, and it starts out by saying, and I'm going to quote here: "The hidden heroes of the film industry also include the paid and unpaid carers, cleaners, counselors, sex workers, drivers, couriers, engineers, security and health workers, low-waged roles still being those available to workers who are working class, women, and for people of color. Their labor is not only discounted and undervalued, but completely unrecognized as being within the industry that it entirely undergirds." I thought it was just a fascinating sort of the fact that, carers and sex workers, that's getting pretty comprehensive here. So like I said, this could be a theme. They could certainly continue onward with the idea, and recognizing all the people who make these things, come together, for sure.
Yeah, that's very interesting. Yeah.
All right. Well,
very good. Well, okay. So that was a well chosen and interesting thing to chat about, and we'll see what you come up with for us to discuss next week.
Yeah. Oh, and the last thing I'll mention, which was just totally random, and I didn't know this until I just looked it up right now, since I started my pick with Pablo Ferro, and it turns out, and again, I didn't just see this until then I looked up Hugo Poole. Pablo Ferro is in that movie, and he's got he plays a couple different parts, and he's also he also is a salsa dancer. So not only a title designer, but also a salsa dancer, and many other things, of course.
Wow!
Just it always pays, I think, when you can wear a lot of different hats when you're trying to put a production together. I think is maybe the end point that I'll make.
Excellent.
All right, sir. Well, I'll look forward to calling you next week. We'll figure something else, some random thing about movies, and have a good one. Say hi to Todd for me.
All right, and a tip of the hat to Jason for making me sound like I was in a cross between a tin can and Jeff Bezos' space capsule on the last recording.
Can't wait to hear my environment for the career.
Well, I'm sure he's as he said, he's working on cleaning that up. If anyone happened to hear it early, there might be a few filtering issues that we're working out. So never mind the bugs, All right.
We'll speak more.
Talk to you next time.
Bye.
All right. Ciao.
And cut. Okay, that's a wrap.
Thanks again for joining Alex Cox and myself today. I'd also like to thank Jason Phelps, who provides our audio support, and Ted Thacker for permission to bookend our conversations with excerpts from his song, The Ballad of Slim Cessna. If you'd like to email us with any suggestions and or comments, you can send those to pablo@internationalfilmseries.com. Again, that's my first name, Pablo, @internationalfilmseries.com. And don't forget, the best way to fall in love with movies is to watch them on the big screen, with extra points for sainthood if you support your local and independent community art house theater. That's where you'll always find the real magic.